Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and we finally have the final Wild Pack figure here to take a look at. This is the Herrerasaurus. I actually reviewed the other figures from this wave of Wild Packs probably about a month ago, maybe. It's been a little bit, and this was the only one I wasn't able to acquire. And I am really happy to now have it here. I actually found it at a Walmart, not my local one, but a Walmart nonetheless, about a day or two ago, and finally getting it up here on the channel. So that's really exciting, and definitely a really fun looking version of the Herrerasaurus. I actually really quite like what I can see so far of the paint scheme on this one compared to previous releases. As far as the box art goes, though, it's just your standard Dino Escape box art as usual from Mattel, which again, I've said it about 100 times already. It's my favorite, I think, out of all of the Mattel lines as far as the box art goes. And then as far as the back of the packaging, we have a look at the other figures that are in this wave of Wild Packs, which would be the Dracorex, the Zuniceratops, the Dimorphodon, and of course, the Herrerasaurus we are about to look at. And we have reviewed all of these other figures here on the channel already. So it is now time for the Herrerasaurus' turn, so let's go ahead, break it out of its box, and take a look at it. So here is our newest version of the Herrerasaurus, and it looks like it's just your standard Mattel Herrerasaurus as far as the sculpt goes. It doesn't appear to be, newly sculpted or anything, or at least from what I can tell so far. I will bring an older one in and compare with it just to make sure, but I don't think it is. Some of them have been surprising me as far as these newer releases from Mattel go, because they have actually had newly sculpted figures, and I actually didn't realize that they were until I was kind of in the process of the review, or maybe right before it. So this one could always surprise me, but as of right now, I think this is the exact same figure. So actually, before I even go into a closer look, I'm going to bring in another Herrerasaurus, just so I know if I need to look at the detail or anything more so on this one than I would if it's just a repaint. So here is a previously released Herrerasaurus, and he's trying to stand on the foot of the other one. Actually, I'll just put them forward. So they definitely look to be the exact same sculpt. I can see no differences at all. The tails are in the exact same position. Even the wrists, where they almost look like it's a broken wrist on the Herrerasaurus, is definitely in the same position. So this one is, again, definitely the same sculpt as the previous one. No difference there. So what we really need to take a look at as far as this figure goes is basically what's new, which would be the paint application. So let's jump to a closer look and do that right now. So as far as the coloration here on the head sculpt goes, we have kind of like a peach type color there around the eye. And you can see it has kind of a glossy look. Every once in a while, Mattel will do that, where they'll give the figure kind of a glossy look in this like area here on the face. I'm not too sure why they do it. Sometimes it looks really nice, sometimes not so much. I feel like I'm kind of like split down the middle on this one. It looks pretty decent, but it's not super flashy or great like it was on the Alioramus, but definitely not terrible either. The eye is painted with a yellow and given a black pupil, and that is all really nicely placed, which is definitely nice to see, because sometimes the eye placement of Mattel figures tends to go haywire. And speaking of that, here's actually a pretty good example of that. This eye is definitely not perfect. You can see it's kind of missed the mark a little bit, so convenient that I mentioned that. And then this eye is a little bit botched, but it doesn't look terrible. From a little bit of a distance away, it looks okay, but definitely could have been placed a little bit better. We do have a bluish coloration, kind of like a bluish gray, or just basically like a light blue here for the coloration, like the primary body color of the Herrerasaurus. You can also see the teeth sculpted out right there, and they're pretty nicely sculpted, but they're nicely painted with a yellowish coloration, or like an off-white bordering on a yellow. If we open the mouth, of course, we have an articulated jaw. You can see that the teeth in the lower jaw are also really quite nicely painted, so that is definitely a plus. There doesn't appear to be any real sloppiness as far as the paintwork goes on the teeth of the Herrerasaurus. There's definitely a really nice realistic tone of color chosen for the inside of the mouth. Really nice coloration applied to the tongue as well. And you can see that everything in there sports a really nice gloss coat. Of course, we don't have that coloration there for the top of the mouth. Sometimes we do get that from Mattel, but it doesn't seem like we ever get that treatment on the Attack Pack or now Wild Pack versions. But it definitely looks nice. We have more of that kind of peach coloration that we have up here for the lower jaw and moving down into the throat, but as quickly as it appears there moving into the throat, it disappears, and then we don't have any other coloration here for the underside of the Herrerasaurus. I would have actually liked if we kept this coloration here, but then maybe applied a different tone of color down here running along the underside, but we do not get that, unfortunately. But then up here on the back, we have kind of like a really light gray that picks up and just kind of stripes and designs all over the place on this figure. And it does actually run out onto the tail, but not nearly as far as I would like. So it was kind of a plus. It's, kind of exciting to see it running out onto the tail, but I really would have liked to have seen it the entire way out, which, Mattel has done this a lot where they kind of run it out a little bit, but not all the way. I think it would have looked nicer had it gone the entire way out. But that light gray and the light blue play off of each other really well. Like, that just looks super appealing to the eye. Really nice kind of flashy color scheme for the Herrerasaurus, while still remaining quite realistic, I would say, and something I could potentially see a Herrerasaurus being as far as the coloration of the body. If we move the head, you could see I'm trying to decide if like the kind of off-white coloration or light gray pops up as we move it forward. It actually does not, so that's interesting to take note of. Usually Mattel covers that base by applying some of that paint within that seam area, but they don't have it on this one. Of course, we don't have any painted nails on the hands or the feet, but we do have the speckles here throughout. We have black speckles on this one. It's not overly abundant, but it's definitely on the figure throughout the entire thing, and that's just another extra added little tiny hint of coloration to the figure. And here is the Jurassic Facts app code, if my camera would focus on it, for the Herrerasaurus if you would like to add this to your collection. But definitely a pretty fun figure. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the Herrerasaurus sculpt from Mattel. I feel like it's a little bit awkward looking at times, but I definitely like it enough that I have continued to purchase every repaint of it so far, so this is another really fun repaint of the Herrerasaurus. As far as articulation goes, if you are familiar with the figure, it's the same articulation that we've had every time. But if you are not, I will show you anyway. We have the articulation of the jaw, which is actually pretty stiff, but works fairly nicely. We have articulation in the neck, so we can look up, or we can look down. So some pretty fun articulation there. We also have articulation in the arms, which works pretty well. And then we have articulation in the legs, which is a little stiff right now, but definitely still works. That one's actually a little smoother than this side. And we also have articulation in the tail with a swivel, which is kind of pointless, but still is there regardless. And definitely a fun sculpt, definitely a fun amount of articulation with a pretty fun paint scheme. For a size of our Herrerasaurus, for a length, you are looking at about the 7-inch range, or about 18 centimeters. And then for a height, when it's kind of in this almost upward standing position, you can see that it is about just a hair over 3¼ inches, or a little bit over 8 centimeters, maybe closing in on 8½ centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovasaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line in comparison to our Wild Pack Herrerasaurus. And you can see that as far as this figure goes, again, it's your standard sized Attack Pack figure. No real huge size, but decently sized, I would say, and definitely a really nice version of the Herrerasaurus. Maybe not the most appealing Herrerasaurus sculpt you'll ever encounter, but it's a Herrerasaurus regardless, so that's always good news. So this brand new 2021 Mattel Jurassic World Camp Cretaceous Wild Pack Herrerasaurus is a pretty fun figure, but it's nothing amazing, nothing to go crazy over or search out relentlessly. And I've heard a lot of people actually state that this is that one figure that they continuously find at their local store when it comes to the newer Wild Packs, which is funny because it's like the one figure I couldn't find for a long time. But I can definitely see why this one would potentially be the one left behind, because I feel like, the Dimorphodon, although we've had a billion of them already, obviously must be a pretty good seller for Mattel, or they wouldn't continue to produce so many of them. And obviously a pterosaur is something that should attract the attention of most kids and collectors alike. The Dracorex is really quite nice looking, a very unique looking dinosaur with a pretty nice looking paint scheme. And then we also had the Zuniceratops, which is a brand new species introduced to the Mattel line. So that, of course, is definitely going to be a good one to pick up right away. And then we've got this poor sad Herrerasaurus, who is the last of the bunch, looking kind of, I would say, like the weakest out of all of them. So I can understand why this one would be, or potentially will be, a shelf warmer. However, with that said, I still think it is actually a really nice version of the Herrerasaurus from Mattel. Like, the coloration that they've chosen for this is really appealing to the eye, especially with the way that they've added in that like peach type color there for the face. It's kind of like a bold choice, I would say, to choose that coloration, but they've made it work so well, and it really plays off of the rest of the coloration of the dinosaur quite beautifully. And then you combine that with the fact that you have those kind of like light grayish stripes that run along the back, and that really amplifies the appeal factor of the figure. I would say definitely gives it a really flashy but really natural look. There really isn't too much else going on as far as the paintwork or anything. It's not really got anything going on for it aside from some speckles, but we do have some pretty decently applied paint application that does look nice aside from the one eye. You've got a pretty decent looking sculpt, again not the best from Mattel, that's for sure. Obviously it has oversized feet, it's got a really short tail. I'm not specifically psyched about the curve in the tail because I feel like it makes the tail look even shorter than it actually is, but at the same time, it's not terrible either, and is a decent looking interpretation of the Herrerasaurus, and you have some pretty fun articulation on top of everything. So if you are interested in this, make sure you check your local Walmart or Target, as I do believe it has been showing up in both of those places, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.